Hello, I'm Sylvia Pippen of Sylvia Pippen Designs and of Indigo Stitch, my quilt shop in La Corner, Washington. I'm going to present a tutorial for our Salish 2020 Block of the Month. I'm going to give you tips and techniques so that you can easily put this quilt together and enjoy the journey along the way. Let's get started. The first step is going to be pattern transfer. How do you get a line onto dark fabric? We are using a low Cornell white graphite transfer paper. An 18 by 36 sheet is what came with your first block of the month. And you'll be using that throughout each month. So the first thing you do is to take the pattern and place it on your background fabric, center it, and tape it down in 3 places. Okay, you can use masking tape is fine. I've also taped down the fabric so that it's secured to the table. It's not going to shift. Now you can lift up the pattern and you can place your transfer paper down. Okay. And then I'm going to tape it basically on 3 sides, and that 4th side I can put a little straight pin in, okay, and that is going through all the layers, and that will secure it. So now it's stable. So what do you use to transfer? You can use a ballpoint pen if you want to see your lines. That way you can keep track of where you've gone. You can use a stylus. You can use a mechanical pencil with a plastic tip and just retract the lead. That will work also. So we're going to transfer just the outline of the orca because that's where the first piece is going to go down. So there's really no point in transferring the rest of it. You won't be able to see it once this black portion has been put down. So once you've transferred it, we'll transfer this with a stylus. You'll take a check before you take your hinge off to make sure you got all the lines. This will be especially important when you're doing the sashiko designs that are more intricate. You can see that the least tape you put on the transfer paper, the better, because it does rip. So I can lift it up and yes, there's my white line, okay? So that will give me reference to place the body of the orca down. The other thing you can do is you can go over your lines with a white chalk pencil and make them a little bit brighter. Okay, that's another thing you can do. Or if you missed a spot, you can fill it in. Now we're going to go on to step number 2, which is going to be transferring the designs onto freezer paper and cutting them out of the wool and then placing them onto the fabric. So you're going to get out this is the Orcas wool cutting guide, and we've made it simple for you. Those of you that have a kit, you've got pieces that fit pretty much exactly to the measurements of the cutting guide. And those of you that one time, you get strips, so you just need to lay them onto the strip and cut it out the rectangle shape that it is there. We're not going to cut out individual pieces out of freezer paper. We're going to cut through the freezer paper and the wool. That's very important, and it makes it a lot easier and less cutting. So you're going to take a pencil and you're going to put a piece of freezer paper. There's the shiny side. We want the dull side up. And this is going to be placed over your piece. And you're going to transfer everything, okay, including the square lines. Then you'll know how to line it up on your wool. And notice I'm putting all the markings, A, B, piece markings here. And I also label the color. This is going to be black wool, white, maroon, and turquoise. So you're going to transfer all that onto the dull side of the freezer paper. Okay, so it's going to look like that. So then the next step is to cut out those squares, or rectangles. out of the freezer paper. And this whole square is what you're going to be placing onto the wool. So here's the turquoise wool. Okay, this is going to go on top of here, and there's no right or wrong side to this wool. You know, it's a very fine, non-woven merino wool from Europe. Really nice to work with and very easy to cut. I'm going to place my piece on top of there, and then I'm going to hit it with an iron, enough to get it stuck down. Okay, so my iron is over here. Of course, you don't want to leave it too long, but enough to get that freezer paper to stick. So there we have our piece. So now you can cut it out. Okay, and it's important you want to keep track of the pieces. You might want to use little containers like this once you cut them for the various colors, just to keep track. You know, some organizational way to do that. So here is the first one. Here's the orca, which I already cut out. Now what's important is I'm cutting through both the freezer paper and the wool. And it's really great if you use a pair of micro serrated scissors. Karen Buckley makes a really nice set of these. And there's also Kai scissors makes a micro set, medium, and then a small. I find these scissors indispensable for working with wool, and I use them for everything, including cutting applique and batiks. So I'll use this medium-sized one for my cutting. And I've cut out all around. So the freezer paper is on the top. There is no right or wrong to the wool, but you do want to orient it, of course, according to the pattern. So then you can lay it out. Got to make sure I get the right one on the right place. Okay. And then so I take the freezer paper off. And then I can place it where it's supposed to go. Don't worry if your chalk lines show. They're going to be covered with sashiko. It really does wear out, and you can actually erase it. Okay. I went over this with a white chalk pencil just to make it look a little brighter, so you can see it. So once you get these done, and then you can glue base this down, and that will be the next step. Okay, we're on to step 3, which is going to be glue basting down our roll shapes. And also I'll be cutting some out, which I didn't demonstrate on the last one too. So I'm going to cut out another shape out of the white, to one of these small fins, just to show you that I'm going to cut through all the layers and how easy it is with these scissors that will grip the fabric. Anyway, so there it is. A nice clean cut. I'll put it in my little box. So, what kind of glue do I use? I like to use a starch-based glue pen. This one's made by Bone. You can get them from Soline. There are various sources. I prefer it to a white glue like Roxanne's because it's water soluble and you can soften it and move your pieces around. And also too, if you have to needle through it, it's very easy to do that. So what I'm going to do is, see it winds out like a lipstick. I'm going to turn my piece over, and I'm going to put glue right on the background. And I'll put some on here as well. Okay. I'm avoiding where I'm going to be stitching, though. Really, it doesn't matter. This is really just to tack it down. This is a large piece. So we'll get them placed. Now there is a piece that goes, there's actually a couple pieces that go under this. I wanted to demonstrate on this large one. We have to put his little spout there, blowhole, there's a little white piece that goes there, and then also his teeth. You can see the teeth here. The easiest way to cut the teeth is with a pair of serrated scissors. You could also cut them with your little micro serrated scissors, but these pinking shears are great. Okay, so I'm just gonna line it up here and cut it. If it's not perfectly lined up, it doesn't really matter. And that's going to go on B. So that's this upper one here. So I'll just remember I took it off and try to keep it right side up. It doesn't really matter that much. See, that's going to sit under there. So I would glue that one down first to get his jagged teeth. Okay, and you can lift it up here. So before I fix that down, we're going to put his little jagged teeth down. I might trim this off just a little bit to make sure none of that shows. So I'm going to put some glue right on the small piece. When I'm using the small pieces, I find it's easier to put the glue on the small piece as opposed to what it's going to be glued to. And then, but so you can put it down, then you can pick it up. It comes up easily. So let's put it down there and see what we can do about covering it up. You might have to push this up a little bit. There, you can make his mouth as open as you want and his teeth as fierce as you want. So then I'm going to fold this back and I'm going to put some glue on it. If it's a real narrow piece, you want to be careful you don't stretch it because you could break it. So I'm going to stabilize it there and put a little glue right there. And I can flap it over. This is really just to tack it down for applique. See, even gluing it stretched it a little bit, but that's okay. So now we want to look for that white piece because we want to do his little blowhole. So we've got B2 up here. I'm going to cut it out and we'll place that. We just want a little white reveal there for his blowhole. So it is important, some of the pieces are, circles, it doesn't matter, but you do want to get it oriented on the right. Make sure you take, this is on the top, so you want to put the glue on the opposite side. Good to work not right on your background piece, so I'm going to put a little bit of glue on that. Important to always put the cap back on the glue, it dries out pretty quickly. So now I'm going to apply this underneath the blowhole here. We'll just lift that up a little bit. It's only tacked down in the center. And we can put that down. Push it down in a little bit further. Right, now we've got his little blowhole reveal. Now, at this point, I would like to, instead of gluing everything down, I like to applique the large pieces down. So I would do the blowhole here, the mouth here, then I would do my whip, it's not really applique, it's whip stitch. Whip stitching it down, and that will be our next step. Now I'm going to explain how to whip stitch down the wool to the background fabric. I like to use a number 100 cottonized polyester thread made by Wonderfil. It's called Invisifil. And it's good to match the thread to your background fabric, whatever that's going to be. So black on black is pretty obvious, and white on the white. But when you get into colors like this turquoise, you want to, if you have a choice, if you can't get an exact match, which is not really necessary, you can use something that's slightly lighter. It's better to go lighter than darker. So you want to match the thread to the wool and not to the background. And here's a maroon. So maybe this is a little bit lighter. So that will also be a good match for that. You also can use grays and neutrals very well. So the gray will really disappear into the turquoise as well. I really like Invisifil thread. It is very strong. It doesn't stretch. Those of you who've used silk for your applique, it acts very much like silk. So now we're going to thread up a needle, and any needle, applique needle with a big enough eye to get the thread through is what I use. So I'm going to thread up some black thread here. It's always a challenge to thread a needle in front of an audience, but here we go. Oh, didn't get it the first time. I'll try again. I always use the little, wet it a bit. There we go. Now, if you have trouble with the thread falling out of the eye of the needle, which is, it happens, you can tie one little overhand knot right at the eye of the needle, and that will help hold it onto the needle. And you don't need to worry about that coming out. It's just a wool knot, and it will certainly, you won't feel it at all as you pull it through the thread. Okay, so the next thing I need to do is to make a really good knot at the end of the thread, and I've got this pretty long, so I'm going to shorten it up slightly. So I wet my finger and make a really good roll. Not like this, because otherwise it's going to pull right out. Okay. So here's my orca. You can really start anywhere you want to. And so I will start from the back and pull the needle up. And I take a bite into the wool, pull it up to the knot. And then I'm going to go down into the background fabric, pretty much directly across from where I've came up with my thread. And I'm going to take a stitch into the background. Now you doesn't have to be perfectly aligned like it would be if you were doing a fine applique with a cloth, especially the black on black. You really aren't going to see it. So I'm just going to whip stitch it, and I do maybe pretty close together, maybe 3/8 of an inch apart. And I just bump my needle up against the wool. And you don't want to pull it so tight that you're going to distort you ripple the wool. But you want it to be tight enough so it's going to really draw it down in. So I just proceed all the way around. And then to finish it off, you're going to take your needle to the background. And see, there are my whip stitches on the back. And you can take a stitch inside the applique piece. I take a stitch in place. You want to really fasten it because the thread is quite loose and it will slip if you don't secure it well. I'll take 2 stitches, and on the third one, and this is illustrated in your instructions. We're going to make a figure-8 knot. There, it's kind of done it on its own, but here it will go down through this loop. You leave a loop, then it makes another loop, and right here, and you go down through that loop. And what this does is it makes a bowline or a figure-8 knot. Can you see the 8? And then that, you pull it up and cinch it up tight. run your needle between the background and the wool, and that knot will hold the applique forever. So that's how you do the whip stitching. Now after we've whip stitched down the background wool piece for the orca body, we can start putting all the design elements on top. You can start anywhere you want, but you could do the eye. So you can, if you want to build them up, you can. I'm going to put some glue on the back of the black eye. It's going to go on top of here. And just keep referring back to the pattern and your photo to make sure you're getting the color sequence right. So we've got the white here and then the black. So then that's going to sit right there. Okay. So then I could glue that down. Then there's a little piece here, a B piece. It's going to fit right in there. So I could take that off. A little dot of glue on that. That's going to sit right there. So now I could glue this on. And you could build up the piece as you wish and stitch. I just wouldn't put all the pieces down because the tendency is to knock them off as you're handling it. So the big eye piece would go there. Okay. And then you could take off and see, let's see, where are all those other pieces going to go? We have these B3. It's going to sit about there. We're going to have B4. And I just eyeball it. And you can see how this would be. This is going to be B9, which sits on the back there. So then if I get them in the right place, I can then take, here's B6. Whoops, I missed one here. I've got to get that in. So we've got B3, B4, B5, and B6. And then you have the fin that sits in here. So you can see how you can build it up. I just want to make sure they're placed. Now, as far as placement, I really do just refer to the pattern. If that's feels like it's not precise enough, you could trace this and put it over and then place your pieces, aligning up the tracings with the background. So you just continue to build it up. So I would probably applique this down and then put the next piece on. Okay, and then applique these down piece by piece. I could maybe get all these glued down. Now these are very skinny pieces, so we're going to have to very carefully put the glue on them. Okay, I'm going to turn it over. And instead of, I'm going to go towards the center, so I'm not stretching it out. And I won't risk breaking it. So go towards the center or whatever it's going to be. And this kind of curves right next to there. It's going to come up to there. Okay. Remember, you can always take these off and replace them. Okay. And I might put my fin in there to make sure. I don't think I have it up far enough. I'm going to have to bring it up into here. So it really comes right up into where close to where the blowhole is, that first one. Okay, and then the fin will sit right here, right there. So I'll make sure there's room for the fin. Actually, he sits back in there, and then this is going to sit right in here. So this is how you're going to build up your pieces. Oops, I got upside down. So if you can leave your paper on there, then you'll make sure you get it oriented correctly. So then this would have to move up a little bit. This goes up in the tail. So just keep moving them around, keep referring back to the pattern. Maybe I'm going to put all the white pieces down. I'll put this one down here, B9, which sits right here. And then we've got our fins here. We can take these off. Here's B8. Okay, it's going to sit right there. B7 is going to sit right here. And then in the middle is our circle, okay, which is B16. Just keep referring back to your photo and to your pattern for placement. Make it less daunting. So there you can see we're getting the pieces placed properly here. So then I would go ahead and glue all these down, and would probably, maybe glue these first. I've got them in the right relation, and I would maybe take this off and take these off. So really the placement of these little U shapes are probably the most critical. So just put this one on first. And you're just going to build it up. And that's really all there is to it. When you are appliquing these small pieces, just make sure you take a bite that's pretty deep so that you're going to catch it and you're not going to pull it through the edge. Okay. And as far as going around the point, you just want to catch it and then turn the point. You don't want to blunt the point, so you do one on this side and one on this side, and then just continue on around. And once you've got it assembled, you can put your eye on there, or you can wait until after your abalone eye. You can put it on later.